Whether you should invest first or pay off your mortgage first.
The notion of paying off a mortgage, I think we've got to divide up different types of property with mortgage. An investment property versus a primary place.
Absolutely.
Residence.
Yep.
If it's an investment property, chances are you're getting leverage working for you to an extent. Maybe you've put 20, 30, 40% down deposit. You're looking to get the leverage impact that property can obviously bring. Your primary place of residence.
You've got the mortgage. What would you say would be some of the benefits of paying down that mortgage?
Getting your mortgage paid off enables you to have, I think, a level of financial fresh air that a lot of people are under the pump where they're struggling to make ends meet, and it is a source of great anxiety for many, many people.
What about a stage of life? Because that's not always about dollars and cents. If you're changing careers, having a family, getting married, doing something within your life, wanting to travel, they're all going to be deciding factors on which route you should go down. It's not always about money, right?
Not every decision is. Hey guys, welcome to this week's Money and Investing Show. This week we're exploring whether to pay off your mortgage or whether to invest. It's the perennial question, and there are a few key takeaways within this. Make sure, as always, you take plenty of notes, and as always, make sure you follow through with action. One last thing, if you've got questions for us that you'd like to ask, the section Ask Andrew, there's the link below. Pose your questions, and we'll deal with them next week in the podcast. Look forward to hearing from you. Hey guys, welcome to this week's Money and Investing Show with me, your host, Andrew Baxter, and as always, my offsider and co-host, Olarenshaw.
Good to be here, Mr. B. It appears as though we both got dressed in the dark today with the soft pink and the navy blue, but looking pretty good, my friend.
Thank you very much. It was a little bit dark when I left my joint this morning, but there we go.
Indeed.
More information than people really needed.
That's right. You've got to invest in your clothes, which is exactly what we're talking about today. Question at hand here. Terrible segue, I know. They get better and better every week. Whether you should invest first or pay off your mortgage first. So this one's targeted at people who have a mortgage for a start, maybe have some excess cash flow, they've been able to budget, they've got some surplus money there. Which angle do you lean towards? Which one's better?
Interesting one, hey. I think the notion of paying off a mortgage, I think we've got to divide up different types of property with mortgage on. And I think if you've an investment property versus a primary place of residence.
Yep.
And the reason for that, if it's an investment property, chances are you're getting leverage working for you to an extent. Maybe you've put 20, 30, 40% down deposit, and you're looking to get the leverage impact that property can obviously bring, notwithstanding the tenant should be covering the mortgage payments. If the mortgage payments have moved higher, the rent's probably moved higher too, and so you sort of get yourself covered. So really what we're talking about is your primary place of residence.
Absolutely.
The home you live in, if you've got a mortgage on it and you've got excess cash, do you pay that mortgage down or do you invest it? And that is a very, very good question. It's probably one of the better ones you've posed for a while, my friend.
Thank you very much. Why don't we start there? Let's start with the principal place of residence. You've got the mortgage. What would you say would be some of the benefits of paying down that mortgage, beyond the obvious ones, of course?
Look, clearly, my father's view on this, if you ever own money to anyone, you don't own your life, they own you, which is an interesting old school philosophy. It served me well. I'm not a big fan of debt. Getting your mortgage paid off enables you to have, I think, a level of financial fresh air that a lot of people are under the pump with, where they're struggling to make ends meet, where each week, each fortnight, each month, that mortgage payment comes out, and then you're trying to run your household on the cash that's left. And it is a source of great anxiety for many, many people. So having that as a focus to get paid off from a non-financial perspective, just from a mindset, psychology,
peace of
well-being,
mind, right?
Peace of mind perspective, I think goes a long way. And so, if you want that financial peace of mind, getting that mortgage gone, certainly is an important step. And there are so many people out there. I've got a good buddy that's in that space. Get your mortgage paid off in 5-7 years as opposed to 30, and you're going to save yourself $300,000 of repayments or whatever it may be. So there are a lot of mechanisms out there to help now.
Can I give a personal anecdote on this? I'm in the stage right now. I've done the investing. My goal at the moment is to pay down my mortgage in 2 years. So pretty aggressive goal. Now, as a peace of mind exercise, so every month you get a statement of how much you've paid and then what the interest is for that month. I've seen my interest effectively more than halve, considering the additional repayments that I've made. Yep. And that kind of philosophy was like, wow, that's pretty cool, actually. I used to be paying X dollars in interest. Now I'm only paying Y. Every time I put a monthly payment on, it's paying off the principal of the place.
That's right. That's the key thing to understand too, is that you always pay off chunks of the principal, not principal and interest, when you do an additional payment on your loan. Very, very important to do that. And it has a fairly dramatic effect on there. So yeah, there are a lot of schemes out there that can assist you. I mean, even moving your mortgage payments from being monthly to weekly or fortnightly actually brings down the overall interest you end up paying. So these are sort of inside the sort of tent tips that people in that space will give you to get that down. But the key thing, if you've got lumps of cash, is pay it straight off. My sister-in-law, who's a nurse, she's not in a particularly high-paying job. Anytime she does overtime, anytime she gets an additional amount of money through anything that she does, goes straight off the principal on a mortgage. And she's done brilliantly at that for the last 9 years now, and has got herself into a very, very good position as a single income, lower income earner. And she's been able to build great equity and relatively modest interest payments. So, people often say, it's okay for you, you've got plenty of money, but there are people on lower incomes that are doing that in just the same way. I think also, Mitch, it's a great segue into the side hustle. If you tapped out from what you earn or you and your partner earn to pay your mortgage off, looking at that side hustle, second job, or other way of getting your mortgage smashed down quickly does give you that ability to get the job done. If I take my father, my father's not an educated man. He was, I think, 9 when he left school. And worked in the car industry in a production line on a car factory. Anytime there was overtime, he took it. And any overtime he earned, didn't spend a cracker of it, just got it paid straight off the mortgage. And likewise, if there was no overtime at the car factory, he worked as labor on a building site. If he couldn't do that, he'd work on the farm. He'd always have something to do, and anything he earned from that was straight off the mortgage. And as a consequence, got my parents' house paid off. I think it was in 9 years, and has been debt free since. And so I think that it is possible. It's easy to make excuses, and there's two things in life: you can make excuses or you can make money. You can't do both.
Yeah, I think it gives you a breath of fresh air, as you mentioned prior, because if you're chipping away at your mortgage and eventually your mortgage is paid off, no matter what happens in life, you've got that principal place of residence. Absolutely. You have shelter. Yep. It's somewhere to live.
Everyone needs somewhere to live. Yeah.
The downside, though, that I'll present to you, AB, is that let's say you said to someone, okay, if you went really, really hard at this, saved really hard, and spent all of the extra money that you have saved up in paying your mortgage, in 10 or 12 years' time, you might pay it off. That seems like such a distant, long, hard goal for a lot of people to stomach. How do you overcome that?
Look, as human beings, it's a proximity thing. If it's in front of you and you can see immediate results and gratification, it's like if you went to the gym once and had a six-pack, that would be great, but it doesn't take that. It takes much longer. It
definitely doesn't take that, yeah.
So, that is human nature. We want to see an immediacy of a return on our efforts. And I guess this, in a way, is why social media and getting likes when you post something, or if you play games and there's a reward for a level, you've got to satiate that need for immediate gratification for people. But success isn't about immediate gratification, particularly with money. It's a delayed gratification. So you have to rewire yourself and say, look, the work you're doing today is to ensure that down the road it is. And it might not seem fun and it might be hard at times. But rest assured, it is very, very much worthwhile. As I say, embrace the side hustle, second job, whatever it takes, get that mortgage gone, is some great advice. Or alternatively, with that additional cash flow that you've got coming in, get investing as well.
Yeah, 100%. Well, let's talk about that right now. So you've got surplus cash, extra money coming in above what you spend. Pros to investing obviously are quite obvious, which is the rate of return that you can earn on those funds, right?
Breaking it down to really simple, when we get this posted on our socials quite often, like, I've got some money, do I put it in my offset account or do I trade and invest with it?
Well, that's a good question.
And it is, because it comes down to such a number of different factors. The easiest thing to do is to whack it into your offset account, and it reduces your mortgage payments, and you feel that you can see directly that there's a benefit to that.
Right there and then too, instantly, right?
So for many people, that's the easiest path to take. And it's not the wrong path. Let me be really clear on that. Everyone is on their own journey in life, and I'm not an advocate for one or the other, because it really comes down to your own journey and your own skill set, confidence, attitude, et cetera, et cetera. The other side of the coin is to say, well, rather than put it in your offset, and don't get me wrong, it's also tax effective to do that too. So it ticks in a lot of boxes for people. The alternate is to say, no, I'm going to squirrel away that extra $200 a week that I've managed to find, and I'm going to put it into an investment fund of some sort. And let's say, for argument's sake, you put it in an index tracker. Not sophisticated, and it's just going to track the performance of the market, which on average over the last 15, 20 years would give you a return probably in the order of about 9%. So if you've got a lump sum of money you can pay off your mortgage, and your interest rate on your mortgage is, say, 5 and a bit, which is probably where it should be right now, or you can take that money and invest it and earn 9 and a bit.
opportunity gain, right?
You've got an opportunity for that money to be working almost twice as hard for you. Now, yes, there's tax implications, and yes, markets don't always move up, so your time horizon needs to be a longer term process. And yeah, there's a different level of skill that's involved as well. So there are a lot of barriers for people doing that, but over the long term, it probably works out financially better.
Yeah. And I think it's going to differ too across income levels within this podcast. So if we break that down now, clearly, I mean, the tenor of this conversation, there's no better or worse. They're just different depending on what your objectives are.
There's a situational context too. I mean, if you're in an environment where interest rates are rising, having less debt makes sense because it's more expensive to service. We're in an environment where interest rates are getting cut, so your cost of holding that debt is reducing down and down. If we see the RBA push another couple of cuts through, or indeed in the US, if we see the Fed reduce, I think they're talking about half a dozen cuts next year. If interest rates are at 2.5%, and inflation's at 2.5%, having debt's not really an issue.
Gotcha. Well, let's go through some situational context. We'll talk about stage of life. Before we do that, let's talk about income levels. Does this conversation differ below, medium, high income earners?
Look, I think it does. If you're a higher income earner, the chances are, you've got more opportunity to pay your mortgage down more quickly, because you've got extra cash coming in. The flip side of this, and this isn't necessarily orientated to someone that's a higher income earner, it's to anyone that's been able to get their mortgage paid down. The next aspect is that, well, why don't we get a bigger house now? We've got no debt on this. We can afford to borrow a little bit more, and we can take all of the equity out of this. Plus, it's moved up in value quite nicely. Let's get a bigger house.
The lifestyle inflation.
So the lifestyle inflation is starting to creep in. So you move from maybe a suburban dry block to maybe something that's on a canal. If we're taking the Gold Coast as an example, and then from the canal to Main River, and then from Main River to beachfront. And so there's
10 million.
There's always, and every time you're going up by an order of cost. And if that's something that's important to you, then good luck to you. It's your life, your race, do what you need to do. And I can't say anything because I've done exactly that. I mean, I'm not going to be a hypocrite and say you shouldn't do that because that's wrong.
Well, you're back on a farm now. You've gone the opposite way, away from the water.
Yeah, I've moved away when it's not raining down in northern New South Wales.
Which it often is, I guess, yeah.
So, I've done beachfront, I've done Main River, and currently, I'm on a rural property, which works perfectly for where I'm at in my life. So there is a risk that lifestyle inflation can come through. And also, as human beings, we're typically aspirational. So we might start somewhere as a first home, and then we move into a second type of home. So, as a young person or a lower income earner, it might be all about affordability and getting your start, which I'd highly encourage that mindset to be, rather than overstretch yourself. You might be in a one bedder somewhere, and then you get a partner, or you start to grow a family, so you need at least a two bedder, and then it might be to move into a single dwelling, so you're in a small house, and it might not be necessarily in the best suburb, but you're in a house versus an apartment, which I think is infinitely better. And then it's to a slightly bigger house, and then a better location, and that journey, better schools, better access to whatever, and on it goes. Now, the challenge with all of that is, number one, there's a time frame that goes alongside all of that, and we might have just walked through 20 years of your life from being a first home buyer to having a family home to a lifestyle type purchase. That could be 20 years. So you've had all that tailwind of your money working for you by holding a real asset through that period of time. But if you've still got a mortgage at the end of that time frame, you've also got less time available to you to get that paid off. So you've got to be looking at debt reduction at the same time as bigger or better assets too.
So invest and pay the mortgage down for higher income earners is what you're saying.
You have to do that. And that's the same for everybody at whatever level you are on the ladder, is that don't just get a bigger property, get the debt paid down as well. Just do what you have to do that. Yeah,
and you can do both. I'll throw my hand in the air. My first ever big purchase was an investment property. That was my goal at the time. My second purchase was the PPR, which I'm now trying to pay the mortgage off. So I've been lucky enough to have both and have transitioned between both parties as well. What about for a medium income earner, AB?
Look, I think the game plan is the same for everybody insofar as get that debt down to a manageable level, and take advantage of the number of things that you can be doing. And if you're a medium income earner, okay, you've got less spare cash going around, chances are you've got a smaller mortgage on the back of that. Get that mortgage just belted down. Do what you have to do. Side hustle I can't endorse enough, and it's almost like a broken record. I saw someone the other day that said, "I saw you speak 20 years ago." I said, "Oh yeah," and they said, "And you're still saying the same thing now." I said, "You know something? You come back in 20 years' time, I'll still be saying the same thing. Do you know why? It works. And if you'd have listened 20 years ago, you'd be in a different position right now." And they're like, Yeah.
Makes sense.
So, sometimes advice is just what it is. It's just the wrapping paper and the customization of the strategy that shifts. And look, I know it's harder if you're on a lower income to be doing that. And therefore, I think if you're in that situation, you approach, if you're on a lower or even a medium income, and not, look, what is a medium income these days when you've got someone that's operating a stop-go sign on 120, 130 grand a year? What is a medium income these days?
200 grand almost these times.
Which is
crazy.
A big number to throw out there.
Yeah.
Yet that may well be what the norm for a mid-size income is. And if you're pulling down a couple hundred grand a year after tax, with the cost of living and a couple of kids to support, that goes out the door really, really quickly. So you still have to budget all these basic processes that we talk about. Even though your income's gone up, the game plan's the same. It's budget, spend less than you earn, get a side hustle and a second income coming in the door, get that debt paid off.
So question for you now, AB, probably the last part of this. Every conversation we have usually is about dollars and cents. What about a stage of life? Because that's not always about dollars and cents. If you're changing careers, having a family, getting married, doing something within your life, wanting to travel, for example, they're all going to be deciding factors on which route you should go down. That's not always about money, right?
Not every decision is. I mean, there's a utility factor as well. In fact, my wife and I were having this conversation the other day. We're looking at a particular piece of real estate down the road at the moment, and it's like, it's interesting and it's got the potential to be fantastic. Then I'm looking at saying, okay, given the ages of my kids, my eldest Charlotte's probably going to be, within the next 8 years will be away at university, and my son's a year behind that, and there's just the production line behind those guys too. And you go, we can do this, but the sort of utility of that is only really 5 or 8 years for us, and then we're going to be in a different stage of life where living near a decent hospital or near an airport so we can travel and spend more time in Italy because the kids are off our hands, or most of them are off our hands, or go back to the UK and do some time there. That's a different driver in there again. Now that's different because, it requires some debt reduction, but it also requires investments to pay for that because your money's going to be working for you too. So the sort of quantum of this, it's not saying you must pay your debt off before you start investing. You can do both. And if interest rates are falling, you're probably better off investing than getting your debt paid down. But if interest rates are rising, you're better off getting your debt paid down and then attending to your investing on the other side of that, if that makes sense. But you really do need to be running both in parallel with each other, which then becomes difficult. If you've got an extra $200 a week, how do you cut that cake up? How much goes to debt reduction? How much goes to investing? This is where things like super and things become more interesting too.
Yeah, I've always been of the opinion, if you're going to make a big shift in your life, then debt reduction is, to me at least, the most important thing. As particularly, let's say you're going to have kids, and obviously they're, you're going to have to feed them and pay for stuff. Eventually they're going to want to go to school, and if you're wanting to send your kids to a private or semi-private school, there's school fees involved and all that kind of thing. Having less stress financially, I think, makes a huge difference.
You have to be on the front foot with it. So if you're moving through that lifestyle change, let's say, for argument's sake, in a conventional relationship, whatever that looks like these days, you're a young couple, you've got together, you bought a house together, like collectively, and you go, okay, we're going to start a family soon. Get the debt paid down. That's your priority. So that when one of you stops work, which will happen if you're having a family, even if it's only for a relatively short period of time, or maybe you're working reduced hours as you go back to work, or maybe you have a decent career break. And I mean, if I take my wife as an example, when we had our first child, Charlotte, my wife had, I think, 5 months off and went back to work, sort of semi-full. It wasn't really full-time, wasn't part-time, it's sort of in between, and she's a partner at a law firm, so she had the ability to do that. Then when my son Jack was born, that's when my wife said, no, I want to enjoy, I can always go back to work, but I don't get the time with the children again. And we're in a fortunate position that we could do that. And so she's been a full-time mum since, which takes some provisioning. And if you're looking down the pipeline and saying, I'm planning on going back to work, well, your financial game plan needs to be here. If you're planning on not necessarily going back to work for a period of time, well, your game plan needs to be in a very, very different place to sort of soothe through that insatiable demand for cash flow that you have when you have a house full of kids. So you've got to be constantly tinkering with the machine. The principles stay the same: budgeting, making sure you don't spend all you earn, having good investments, having your debt under control, and having a clarity on what your objective is. Those things never change. It's just the circumstance that's around that. And look, we've just had a newborn a few weeks ago, and so we were looking at, prior to the Mark 6 arriving in our house, my wife was actually seriously looking at easing back into what she did as a career. And now she's obviously not for another couple of years. So again, there's a fork in the road, and you need to have a flexible enough game plan to work around that. And within all of this, getting educated is probably the most important step in everything that we've talked about. To know that, yes, you can, basic as it may sound, pay your mortgage off more quickly, or to know that there are tax benefits with an offset account versus investing. And the great thing about an offset account is that you're not actually giving it to the bank, so you can redraw on that if you need that money. And trust me, whenever you need money, banks aren't usually that good at lending it to you. So if you've got the ability to pull it back out, you've got some level. So there's a big advantage to having that sort of offset type structure rather than outright paying the loan down, where the bank then has the money. So just in that small nuance, there's quite the difference. On the other side of the coin is, well, if I were to invest, what do I need to do, and how do I do it? And these are all things to get educated upon, rather than look back and go, I wish I'd known that 10 years ago. I could have done things really differently. And that's what we aspire to do through conversations like this, and through the resources that we provide here at Australian Investment Education, or through the Wealth Playbook, is to give people a base layer of knowledge so they can make better quality decisions. And you go, okay, well, I've got a lump sum of money that I've just inherited. And like we've been talking about, heading off for a holiday, the kids haven't had a holiday for a couple of years. And it's like, okay, why haven't you had a holiday for a couple of years? Oh, we don't, we haven't been able to afford it. Okay, why is that? Hard question to ask.
Yeah.
Oh, because you have been spending.
Yeah.
Or we don't have enough income to support that which we're doing. So this is a bonus. We weren't expecting it. Let's go and enjoy it. They don't come along too often. And that's the wrong lens, because all you're doing is wallpapering over the cracks. And please, I sound like the fun police when I say this. But instead, that money, that lump sum you got, use that either to get invested, so that the income that investment spits out pays for your holiday, or get your debt paid down so you're under less financial burden, and go back to what the core issue is within the problem. We don't have enough money. Okay, so that's down to two things. Either what's coming in isn't enough, or what's going out is too high. And if you can reduce what's going out or improve what's coming in, then you're going to fix that problem, not just so you can have a holiday this year based on a one-off sort of bump of cash coming in, but you're setting yourself up for a better quality financial future across the board. And we're in an environment where I think there's so much more opportunity. Everyone's sort of screaming from the hills that AI is going to be the end of the workforce. And in actual fact, AI is most likely going to be able to create an opportunity for people to have a sideline income far more easily, far more quickly, and far more productive than at any other time in history. So there's an example of something else that's coming over the hill to make it even easier for people to build a plan B side hustle type income. But you've got to do that, and you've got to allocate the time to doing that. And that might come out of other aspects of life, leisure time, downtime, scrolling time, whatever it might be, but it's time well spent, because over the long term, it's going to fix you up into a financial position that you can be proud of, where you've got your debt under control, if not paid off. And on the other side of the ledger, you've got those investments working. So I guess, the key takeaway is, if interest rates are going up, get your debt paid down. If the interest rates aren't, get your investments working for you. Either way, get that spare money working and don't waste it.
Very nice. Thank you very much, AB. Cheers.
My pleasure, anytime. There you have it, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Most importantly, hit the notification button, and we'll look forward to hosting you next week.